I'm BugeyeBob, and I'm on a mission to resurrect this 1958 Austin Healey Mark I Sprite from this to this, so it doesn't end up in this. BugeyeBob here again. This time I want to take a real deep dive into this whole lift TIG process. Many years ago, I was restoring an aluminum boat. I had a cheap-ass AC welder, I think it was a Westinghouse, and attached to it was a high-frequency TIG unit, which is kind of like, I don't know, all I know is it worked. And I managed to plug up holes as big or bigger than this by putting a piece of stainless steel under the aluminum and using the TIG. It was kind of a stainless steel spring that I made out of just flat stainless steel, kind of Z-shaped. But anyways, I was able to plug up the holes in the aluminum with that, no problem, with that high-frequency TIG unit. Since I got this welder, I've tried multiple times to use the TIG function on it, and it's been an absolute damn impossibility. And I'll show you why as we go along. But the main reason is that every time, they say that what you're supposed to be able to do is touch the electrode to the weld metal, lift it off, and the arc will start. No matter how fast I touch it, my experience is the electrode always welds to the base metal. And I am going to show you very quickly what I mean by that. Let me grab my helmet, turn on the welder, make sure my gas is still on, which it probably is since I don't remember turning it off yesterday. Nope, I did shut off. Okay. I'm running gas at about 18 to 20 CFM, CFH, whatever it is. 18 to 20. Pure argon. The hell? All right. Get my helmet on, get my gloves on, get my glasses on so I can see what the hell I'm doing. And this is what I mean. So I've got these two pieces of metal laying here. Nothing holding them. And I have, here we go, turn some gas on, the welder's on, the ground's hooked up. There, that's exactly what I mean. That goddamn thing welded itself to the metal, so I couldn't get the arc started. I am not a welder. I'm an enterprise resource planning software expert. So, with lots of discussions with people, one of the things they said was, make sure you keep your electrode clean. So you wipe your electrode down with acetone, which, by the way, if you do, and your electrode has a color on the end of it, like this one does, which is kind of a purple. You probably can't see it. I can barely see it. But if you wipe it down, the acetone is going to take that off. So you want to have a purple magic marker handy to put it back on with, because each of those colors tells that it's a different type of electrode. So it's just straight tungsten, it's tungsten that's thoriated, it's tungsten with lanthanum, it's tungsten with rare earth in it. So keep your electrode clean. Got that. Now, the next thing they said was you need to put a real sharp point on your electrode, and that'll stop it. So let's pull that electrode out, and I'll try not to touch it. We will bring this electrode, which maybe you can see that has an extremely sharp point on it. Let's see how good that does us. Yeah, and you got to put the electrodes in from the other end. Pointy end goes in first, folks. Set that about there. I'm not real fond of these electrode holders because they tend to not grab the electrode until the last second. Okay, so sharp, pointy electrode, which I cleaned. Let's see how this one does. Fire up the welder. Oh, and I'm running 45 amps because this is 18 gauge steel that I'm welding, which seems to be a good amperage to work that at. And let's see what happens this time. And it welded down again. So I find that kind of irritating because no matter how hard I try, this whole idea of lift TIG or tap and lift TIG or touch it gently and lift TIG doesn't work worth a shit. I don't want to have to literally clamp every piece that I go to weld down before I can weld it. I thought about it a little bit and I thought to myself, you know, maybe there's a better way of doing this, and maybe that better way is to take the welding rod, and they say to clean the welding rods off, and so I did, and lo and behold, it did get some crap off. This rod right here, which you probably can barely see, is actually MIG wire. It's 030 MIG wire that I had stripped off the end of a roll, and I stuck it in the vise, clamped it down, grabbed the other end with a electric drill, pulled it and spun it so that it twisted a little bit, and it straightened it right out. Works slicker than hell, folks. Let's try something different. This time, I'm going to touch this to the base metal, then I'm going to touch the electrode. Oh, there is one other thing I need to try first. Sorry, bear with me. The next thing they told me to do was they said that I need to use a smaller electrode. So I will switch over to a 1/16 electrode and try that. They also said to use either a 5 or a 6 cup size. So I'm trying a 6. And here is a 1/16 electrode with a tip that is ground. Where's my thing here? Tip is ground to a fairly fine point. They say something like 22 degrees. Well, I don't know how the hell you find exactly 22 degrees, but apparently some people can do that. I just tried to get it to a real sharp point. Long and thin point. And for those of you coming to Pensacola, to the beach, when the Blue Angels are in town, which is usually during the summer, and practicing, apparently on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, they have practice shows, and you can go out to the Pensacola Naval Air Station and watch the practice show, and they also have the Navy Air Museum there, so good fun to have by all. Okay, let's try this tip here, 1/16, sharpened, quite sharp. $20 on the gas. Welded down again. So, I don't like that shit. So what can we do instead? Let's take this rod, which is actually the wire from the MIG welder, stuck it in the vise, pulled on it, spun it with a drill to straighten it out, and it straightens it out into nice long straight pieces, takes the curve out of it, works great. Let's try this. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to put this down on the metal. I'm going to touch the electrode to that wire, and that will melt before the electrode does, and that will start the arc, like this. Like I said, folks, I'm not a welder. Let's try that again. And your first thought should be, yes, Bob, that works fine, but what do you do if you've got a big thick wire? Well, what you do then is you grind the tip of that big thick wire down, just like that. That stuck a little bit. Now, unfortunately, I don't have enough heat. Let's try this again. If you look closely, you'll see the tip of that thing is slightly rounded over and slightly bald on the end. Now, I did not get these tips on these thicker wires down as thin as I probably should have. So let me go very quickly, just spin those down and get a longer, thinner tip on them. So what I've done is I have put a long, thin tip actually on each end. Both of these. Now there is, so let's try these. Welder's still on. Turn the gas on. Put the tip of the rod down on the metal. Touch to the rod. And there's my start. Just friggin' beautiful, isn't it? Now, unfortunately, that bright light probably indicates that I'm getting some contamination in the weld. All right, again, I am not a welder, but there you can see the penetration through. Again, I'm not a welder. I got really way too large of a heat affected zone, mostly because I'm trying to work with this real thick wire on this thin metal. But there is another way that I can do this. Well, the other thing that I suggest is raising your amperage. I just raised it up by 5 amps just to see if that does any difference at all. So I'm now running 50 amps. Let's try just, nope, doesn't make any difference on that. Let's put this metal down. That's a little too hot. You can see that just that extra 5 amps literally burned the end off of that electrode. So I got to stop and polish my electrode. Now you can buy special electrode grinders that grind the electrode lengthwise like this, but I use a belt sander and an electric drill and spin an electrode in the drill, hold the tip down on the belt sander, and it's a good idea to use that belt for nothing but electrodes, and probably should use different parts of the belt for different types of electrodes. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Got about a 3/8 of an inch stick out here. And maybe that's closer to 7/16, but whatever. Turn on that. Down. Six penetrations, like, ooh, that is beautiful. I like that. Let's zoom in on this. So this is the bottom of the weld, and I got full penetration through. This is the top of the weld, and that's almost flat. Some people will say that's a bad weld because there's no filler metal in it. Some people say that's a great weld because there's no filler metal in it. But that is a complete fusion weld of those two pieces of metal to each other. Now I am going to try, we're going to darken the lens up a little bit and see what we get as far as video. Because I haven't tried this camera with on it. So let's find out what we get. So those two pieces of metal are trying to cross over each other. So what we need to do is we need to hammer the weld out. other side. Let's see if I can give you a close-up of this. With that behind it, you can see there's a white gap between those two pieces of metal. So, this is the side I was welding on. Did kind of good through there. Got a little fast right in here, and it dips down. I should have had some filler rod in there. Not too bad coming across here and then across here to the end. My heat affected zone stays pretty consistent until I get down towards the end and it starts spreading out wide. I probably could have moved faster down on that end, but I definitely needed to put some filler rod in because there's some gaps here that on the bottom side of this where it didn't weld up. So I'm going to turn this piece around. There's a gap here. I'm going to weld this way and try to get some filler rod into it. And maybe just for giggles, I'll use the... No, I won't use the larger rod. I seem to be doing pretty good with this smaller stuff. We'll stick with the smaller stuff. All right. So, pretty good penetration through to the bottom. Pretty good weld on top. And I didn't burn through the end. I just kept putting a little bit more filler and more filler and more filler there. And I think that's not quite welded out to the end, but it's pretty close. So I didn't quite get it welded out to the end on the bottom, but it's pretty good other than that. So I am kind of pleased with that. Yep, that ruined that tip. You know what, folks? You got to turn your gas on. What you just saw was what happens when you got no gas on. Dumbass. And I ruined the tip. If you're using lift TIG, the lessons I've learned are use real pointy electrodes. Make sure you turn your damn gas on so you don't do stupid stuff like that. If you can use thin wire, then use the thin wire to start the arc on. Put the thin wire down on the base metal, touch the electrode to the thin wire will burn off and start your arc for you. That seems to be pretty efficient. If you have to use the thicker wire, then consider either making a real sharp point on it, or the other thing you can do is start with the thin wire to get your arc initiated and then switch over and use the thicker wire. But those are the things that I've learned. Oh, and keep your material and your wire and your electrode tips all nice and clean. First thing is, I stick the electrode in the end of an electric drill, high speed, turn on a belt sander. And now I've got a real long, sharp needle point on that thing. All of the grinding marks go lengthwise like they say they want. And I think it works beauteous. Like I said, it's best to use that belt strictly for that. So if you do woodworking and all that, shit, belts are what? $3, $4 a piece? Buy another damn belt. These are some of my first attempts at TIG welding. Kind of nasty and ugly looking. You can see here blew through what a goddamn mess I made of these things. Oops, let's get this up and over. You can see how ugly and messy those welds are. And that was from trying to learn how to do it using the lift TIG process. This here is where I just did some testing just now. That is the end of the deep dive into how I solved this lift TIG insanity. I still would much prefer to have a TIG unit that's got the foot pedal for it, has high frequency start, all that sort of stuff. Don't have the money, so not gonna get one. That's just the way it goes on sometimes. Work with what you got. Thanks again for watching, folks. Like, subscribe, share. Tell all your friends. If you hate it, tell all your friends and tell them, you got to watch this because this guy is so bad. And then it warns other people. If you learn something from this, great. I love teaching. I love learning. So what I learn, I try to pass on. That's what this whole series is all about, is what I've learned in restoring this beast. And the process along the way, so that if you decide you want to take on a project like this, you have some idea of what kind of problems am I going to run into. I got to buy a welder. What if I buy a welder that's cheap that has lift TIG? Because honestly, a cheap TIG welder will get you a long distance in doing sheet metal repair. A cheap one's got lower voltages, hopefully can run thin wire, might be all you need. But, you know, it has its problems in trying to learn how to use it. So I'm hoping that what I've learned here and pass on to you folks saves you the frustration that I had to go through. So have a great life. Enjoy your family. Stay close to them. And we will see you on the next episode of BugeyeBob, where I get into putting sheet metal back into the car. Fun wow. See you then. Well, folks, that's it for this episode of BugeyeBob. I really appreciate you watching and hope that, like me, you've learned a few things to do, or maybe not to do, in this episode. Please like and comment on this video, as it encourages YouTube to share it with others and helps grow the channel. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell to get notified when new videos are released. If you'd like to support this channel and save Lazarus from the recycle furnace, you can now make a one-time or recurring donation through PayPal. You can also support this restoration project by becoming a member at patreon.com/BugeyeBob. Patreon members get early access to the videos, and in the future will enjoy question and answer sessions and live streams. As this channel grows, future Patreon member benefits will include bonus or extended videos, member names in the credits, and the ability to suggest topics for future videos. You can follow this BugeyeBob restoration on YouTube and Facebook. You'll find the links in the description below for PayPal, Patreon, YouTube, and Facebook. Once again, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, and supporting this channel.